Carry on. Right. So where are we? Have we moved on to why Advaita is so popular yet?
Well, I can only speculate, but there's been it was actually
and it's Neo-Advaita as well, isn't it, really, that we're talking about now?
Because it's not really classical. There's much less emphasis on the unreality of the world, because that clearly is a really difficult one to defend. I think it starts in Bengal in the colonial period. Vivekananda really was probably the main figurehead of Neo-Vedanta, right? So he's borrowing bits of, why is it Neo? Because it's bits of yoga, bits of bhakti, bits of all, yeah. But ultimately he's if you read his writings, the Advaita is there. So why is it popular? Well, because in a sense, the colonial intellectuals and missionaries are ridiculing Hinduism, all these, elephant-headed gods and 16 goddesses, and how ridiculous, and, how can God have an elephant head and all of this. So the Advaita Vedanta can say, well, yes, that's just sort of popular, conventional religion, but ultimately all of that is unreal. So that is a much more easier position to defend than a Vaishnava who's going to say, yes, God is Narayan and he has 4 arms and he lives in Vaikuntha. And you know what I mean? Good luck with, trying to come up with a rational, coherent explanation for that. So in that sense, it was appropriated by some Hindu nationalists. And
to kind of make things more palatable to defend against the British, right? Yeah.
And when it got exported in the 60s, it's an easier philosophy to sort of, accept that, that all of these gods and goddesses, okay, they're only useful, they're kind of like conventionally real. So in the West, we might use the language of metaphor and symbol, which we're familiar with, although Advaita doesn't say that. But it's easy to sort of apply those terms, that these are metaphors or symbols to reach the divine, and the divine is beyond all of that. So it sort of fits more easily into a kind of new agey, non-sectarian, the truth is one, all paths flow into the one truth, which is kind of a non-philosophical, kind of very easy to, we'll all hold hands and chant Om sort of thing, right? But which of course is not the history of Indian spirituality at all. It was debates, and there were, the differences were recognized very, very clearly by the theologians. So, that might be one reason. And then, a lot of the 60s gurus came out of the Neo-Advaita lineages, like Shivananda's disciples that were Advaitins, great Shivananda from Rishikesh, who was a real scholar, was a real yogi. His disciples, Satchidananda and Swami Vishnu Devananda, they were also real yogis in their own right, but they were, they made an impact in the 60s. They were Advaitins. And on the other side, you find Krishnamacharya, and you find Guruji Iyengar not really representing their non-dual, they were not Advaitins. They were not representing the sort of, we can call them dualistic, but that term is not quite accurate. They weren't representing these traditions in their teaching. We don't see any of that in Guruji Iyengar's. I personally asked him, one time I met him, I said, you still identify with that Vishishta Dvaita, Ramanuja?
I know, you asked him the 3 questions. I saw that in another interview. I've got 3 questions for you.
But it wasn't part of his teachings. So
why not? Why not? I mean, what I wanted to ask is, do you think it's something that this doership thing with Advaita, right? There is no doer, there is no effort to make, right? I mean, it's kind of a convenient. Do you think it's like a kind of a lazy person's practice, really, or a convenient thing to think, where there's no sadhana to do? Whereas you're telling me that actually the Advaitins do sadhana, and and there's, because this kind of the lack of a person doing anything, or the lack of anywhere to get or to do, it somehow fits more, doesn't it, right, than the idea of yoga as transforming from one thing to the other, or I don't know. Do you want to speak about that at all?
Yeah, but in classical Advaita, that's not the philosophy at all. As long as you're in conventional reality, as long as you're
there is something to do.
You have to be as intense as the yogis and the Sankhyans and all the other schools and the Buddhists. You have to have that level of intensity to get out of the illusion. What lies on the other side, that's a different thing. But when you're under it, it's not a lackadaisical, there's no doer, there's nothing to be done.
I think that's how it's framed now. Yeah.
Those sound bites might be true on the highest level, but they don't apply in conventional reality for real Advaita Vedantins. Yeah, I mean, and their sadhana is primarily, by the way, the study is Jnana Yoga.
Right. And and what does that entail? I mean, we know the Ramana Maharishi is the who am I kind of question. Is that the fundamental, kind of
sort of like that? In other words, we're under this cognitive illusion, and the way out is not so much through action, although they do the pujas and the rest of it, but really it's through correcting our understanding. So therefore, through the study of the text and internalizing the text and really meditating on the great statements of the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads, this is more of a Jnana Yoga practice, not a Chitta-Vritti Nirodha practice, but it is absorbing in the mind, in the Vedanta Sutras, in the Upanishads, in the Upasanas, which means meditating on the kind of symbols of Brahman in the Upanishads. By doing that, the mind becomes totally Brahmanized, and at a certain point you have this eureka moment, which is a very interesting, mysterious moment in all these traditions. How do you transition from a mental state to an actual perception of reality? The mental state is, okay, the world is false, well, you can go around, you're mumbling that to yourself all day, right? Sure. But when do you actually cease to see the world?
Yeah.
That eureka moment. Same with Patanjali, right? You nirodha. And then all of a sudden you're going to have this transitional moment when Svarupa Vastanam becomes your experience. The same with the Krishna Bhakta. You're meditating on a form of Krishna made of samskaras, right? You got your blue from your Levi gene, right? You got your yellow from your whatever, when it's dhoti, you got a peacock feather that you saw on the peacock. You're putting it together with a flute that like the one you played in school. You're putting this melange together, and at some point, that mental composite suddenly have a eureka moment, and the actual Sri Krishna is there, resplendently manifesting. So all these traditions have that pivotal transitional moment, which is very
kind of sounds slightly tantric, really, that the sacrifice ends up having some kind of ontological status in itself.
Well, the point being that it always was ontologically real. Like for Advaita Vedanta, everything actually is Brahman. But there has to be a transitional moment from you just telling yourself the story that everything is Brahman, everything, world is false, world is false. The transitional moment to actually experiencing it that way. And the same with Patanjali. There's to be that moment from Nirodha. Still, it's a mental state, right? Even Asmita Samadhi, it's still a mental state. And all of a sudden, it has to be this pivotal moment when all of a sudden, bada boom, mind is no longer functioning at all. And now Svarupa Vastam, and the same with what I was saying about Krishna. There has to be a moment from a mental construct to an actual darshana, an actual vision of God. We're wondering a bit here, but but all of
it seems to me.
Yeah,
no, it's good. It's good. I mean, just trying to clarify the terms around this idea, because it's being used a lot, I think, and and I don't think it's always understood as clearly as it could be. But I mean, what about the idea of transformation in Patanjali being a transformation from one state to the other? He does seem. I mean, you're the guy on Patanjali, really. He does seem to say that there's a new mind is born, right? Like from Chitta-Vritti, at the end of the Samadhi Pada, we have like something new. So you're going from one state to the other, whereas in Advaita, there's no other state, obviously. So you're kind of unpeeling, or I mean, like you're kind of, it's a transformation, but not a transformation from one thing to another, but kind of like within itself, kind of thing.
Well, there's an overlap and there's a difference, right? In Patanjali,
right.
Yes, the mind is transforming, becoming more and more and more sattvic. You're going through the yamas, niyamas, sattva. Then you finally samadhi, some kind of stability, and then you're transforming it up through savichara, nirvichara, right? Savita, right up, asmita. These are all mental states. The mind is real. But the point is you want to go to a transmental state where it's a svarupa vastanam, where mind is near bija. There are no more bijas. There's nothing. The mind, but it's still there. It's just awareness is no longer aware of it. In Shankara, there's this overlap with that. You're trapped in conventional reality. You use the mind. You're not nirodhering it, filling it with jnana, studying the Upanishads, internalizing, world false. You go around telling yourself a story, right? But all of a sudden, there's going to be this eureka moment So the mind is transforming, eventually becomes 100%, Patanjali 100% still. Advaita 100% permeated with Upanishadic knowledge. All of a sudden, there's this eureka moment, and then there's no more mind anymore. And there's just an infinite experience of transmental Satchidananda.
They're going to the same place. Are they ending up the same place?
I think they are. Not Krishna Bhakti, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Not Vaishnavas. They don't want nothing to do with this. They're not, they don't want to be, they don't want an experience of just their Atman. They want an experience of Bhagavan, who's a real being, wonderful.
But potentially would still say that there's independent jivas, like loads of little jivas and one big, right? And Advaita, I guess there's just emerging into.
Yeah, but they'll be relevant. The experience is the same. When Sankhya and Yoga talk about the experience of Swarupa Vastanam, the theoreticians may say there's a bunch of individual Atmans, all simultaneously having the same experience, but the experience is infinite, eternal consciousness. The experience of Advaita Vedanta is eternal, infinite consciousness. Experiences are the same. There's no difference in the way that they are described. The difference then is the theologians. The difference is, well, for those who are not enlightened, Sankhya says the world is real, souls are eternally individual. Shankara says world is unreal, individuality is also unreal. So, but that's a theoretical difference that the philosophers are debating over. The experience is the same. Infinite, eternal, pure consciousness with no objects. Non-dual. It's a non-dual experience. There's no duality, even in Patanjali. Duality is real and existing for others. So it's really not a big difference. It's not a big difference in terms of the grand finale goal.
What about text to read? If anyone's trying to read something on Advaita and they'd like to study it more, is there anything that kind of is entry level and makes reasonable sense immediately to people interested?
I think people should read the actual text themselves, because so much activity has been done.
In Sanskrit.
No, not necessarily, but read
any particular Upanishad you can think of? Katha Upanishad or?
The thing is, the Upanishads are not either monistic or dualistic.
Right. Okay.
Later traditions that are monistic and dualistic. The Upanishads don't use these categories. They just talk about Brahman, and here it's person, and there it's not a person. Here the soul is real, and there it's not real. So it gives you. That's how you can have sects, because these are amazing scholars. They're not fools. They know Sanskrit since they were 5. They're speaking in Sanskrit at home with their Brahmin dads. So how is it that they differ so enormously? Because the Upanishads allow that. Allow both types of interpretation.
Finally, what about? How would you compare Buddhism to Advaita?
Well, Shankara, if you look at the second chapter of Vedanta Sutra, debates Buddhism. He rejects Buddhism on the grounds. Okay, so Buddhism now is a real world, not an illusion. But they agree. Differences that for Shankara the Atman is eternal and infinite and autonomous, can abide in its own nature. In Buddhism, the Atman is momentary. It's only momentary flow of consciousness that's always interdependent with its objects. It can never be absorbed in its own nature. There is no. In fact, for Buddhism, that own nature is avidya. To think that it has a swarupa.
Okay, that's what I thought.
There's very big differences philosophically.
But the kind of emptiness or fullness, the shunyata or shunya is very similar to Advaita. That's what I was thinking, right?
Well, they would say
this purna midam, this kind of emptiness is fullness and fullness is emptiness.
Yeah, but that's not a Buddhist. That's the Isha Upanishad. The Buddhists shouldn't be using that. But the Buddhists. They have their own text. They don't quote the Upanishads. Maybe in the early period they did. Like the Mandukya. But anyway,
I was relating that text to Buddhism and to the idea of no, I wasn't quoting as a Buddhist. They used to be using this text.
Sure, but emptiness means that nothing has inherent independent existence. everything is interdependent with other things, like Indra's net. Like the knot on a net is not an isolated thing. It's four bits of string feeding together, and they create the knot in the middle. The knot is not an existentially autonomous, independent thing. It's dependent on the four bits of string coming into it to make the knot in the net. So therefore, what shunyata is often misunderstood. Shunyata means nothing has inherent essential existence. If number one, because it's momentary. If something is a momentary, has no essence. If it's an essence, that essence survives, right? That's what an essence is, something that doesn't change. Nothing has an essence like that for the very simple reason it's momentary, number one. And an essence is something which is immune from anything else. It abides with its own glory and its own essence. So number two, the Buddha says, not only is everything momentary, but it's always interdependent with other things. So that's what shunyata means. It comes to mean certainly in Madhyamaka philosophy. Remember, these terms have different histories even within the different Buddhist schools.
Right. Whereas in Advaita, there's nothing, essentially, the world isn't real. It's, and the interdependence is an illusion as well, right?
Yeah, because there's no two things. How can anything be interdependent if there's only one entity, number one? And that entity does have an essence, an eternal Sat Chid Ananda essence that abides in its own autonomy. Not only does it not need anything else, but there is nothing else for Advaita Vedanta, for it to be dependent with or interdependent with. It's pretty different.
Yeah. Well, I think it's useful. I mean, just to bring in different kind of philosophies, right, to compare them to Advaita, because Advaita is such a, I mean, if you've argued with anyone who's interested in Advaita, it's such a difficult position to argue against, right? Because, there is only one thing. So it kind of constantly circles around this, but
then you just have to hack away at what is Maya then. That they just, and then you'll see that the Advaitins you'll never get an answer to that. And that's what their opponents have done for 1,200 years. That's their main argument. What is this? Right. Where does the superimposition come from? Where does the superimposed world, where does that image come from? And you won't get an answer there. At that point, then they would say, well, when you're in the illusion, how are you supposed to be? When you're in the illusion, you're deluded, so you can't answer that. I mean, you get some kind of a non-philosophical response, at which case, what do? You just say,
I'll make a cup of tea and thanks very much.
Let's talk about something else.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks again, Edwin, for clarifying another term, and I hope we can talk again soon to chat about something else. I mean, I suppose the thing with the Advaita is that people often use it as an idea to do whatever they want in the world, because there's no doer, there's no illusion, right? So there's no practice necessary. So it's a kind of but it's been
that's not Advaita Vedanta. They're serious practitioners. They're serious. I mean, the Vaishnavas will object to that, their ultimate ontology, but they're respect worthy. They've commanded Vedanta responses. Nobody can establish a Vedanta position without engaging Advaita. So the real Advaitins are highly respect worthy people. They're learned. They're the yamas, niyams, the whole thing. They're sannyasa, they're strict. The reason, in my opinion, if I may just say this, that the Vaishnavas object to Advaita Vedanta. They have no problem with it. They accept that you can experience your own Atman, and when you're in that state, it's exactly what Advaita says it is. They don't deny that. It's an eternal, autonomous, there's no dualities, there's no awareness of either the world or other souls. So whether they exist or don't is completely redundant when you're in that state. It's just a theoretical question. Where the Vaishnavas, why they really invest so much in opposing Advaita, it's not because of that experience. They accept that experience. It's because Advaita tells them that their beloved Bhagavan is Maya. Their beloved Lord, that is the goal of their life, the goal of their bhakti, the goal. For them, it's not just a path to some impersonal end. It is the path and the end. They want that relation. For them, that relationship is eternal in this world and in Vaikuntha and Goloka in the Brahman dimension. and if you when Advaita, that's why they call them Mayavad. If you tell a Vaishnava your beloved Bhagavan is Maya, that's when the Vaishnavas really feel that it's their duty to their beloved to defend the reality of God. So that's where Ramanuja ends up writing 100 pages. Otherwise, he wouldn't care.
Maybe you can do that next time.
Yeah, like yoga, you don't care.
Can defend.
Because
you can defend Krishna,
Ishvara, right? Yoga accepts Ishvara. It doesn't say anything about Ishvara. It doesn't talk about bhakti, but as long as you accept Ishvara, fine. You want a Swarupa Vastanam, you want that as your grand finale. Good, God bless, good luck, go for it. But don't come telling a Vaishnava that Bhagavan is illusory, because then you end up in, then you're going to have this, very sort of intense philosophical response.
All right.
Yeah,
that was good.
All right.
Thanks for that. Good to see you. All right.
All right.
Cheers. Yeah. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye. Bye now.